proclaiming Christ, victor over sin and death. You're listening to Ancient Faith Radio, your Orthodox Internet radio connection.
Welcome to Live with the Louhs with your hosts, Father Nicholas and Dr. Roxanne Lowe, where we will connect our Orthodox faith to day-to-day living and relationships to our family, our work, and our view of ourselves. Father Nicholas is the priest at St. John the Divine Greek Orthodox Church in Jacksonville, and Dr. Roxanne is a licensed clinical psychologist who uses her extensive training in private practice. Questions are welcome by calling 855-237-2346. That's 855-237-2346. Here now is Father Nicholas and Dr. Roxanne.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Live with the Louhs. We are so excited that you're joining us on this Tuesday, September 19th. You know, if you are new to Live with the Louhs, it's a show that merges both faith and psychology to really give you some practical steps that can help you apply them in your own walk of faith. So we're so grateful that you're joining us. And tonight I have my lovely wife joining me, Dr. Roxanne Lowe.
Good evening, everyone. So happy to be here with all of you.
And we are so blessed to have you and all of our guests who are going to be joining us this evening. But before we get to them, I do want to encourage you to just stay connected to us through our social media platforms. You know, friends, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, Instagram, and on YouTube, all under the headings of the Louhs. And that last name is spelled Louhs. And so you can find all of our sermons or our messages or just our weekly encouragement for people. You can find that all there on our social media platforms. And if you're also looking for a word of encouragement, every single day we send out a daily inspirational message by email. And so if you're interested in receiving one of those messages, we do encourage you to go to our website at thelouhs.com. That's Louhs.com, and click on that button, the subscribe button. And all you have to do is simply put in your email address, and every day at 7 a.m., you'll receive one of our daily words of encouragement. And I also want to encourage you as well to just join the conversation this evening, especially tonight. This is a very difficult conversation, but a much needed conversation we're going to have. And I want you to feel part of this. I don't want this to be simply a monologue or just us talking, but we want to hear from you. And you can call us at 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855-237-2346, or email us a question during the live broadcast of our show by emailing us at ask@ancientfaith.com. That's ask@ancientfaith.com. So tonight we're so blessed to have some dear friends back with us. You know, back in February we had a show, and then later on in May we also had a show, all related around the topic of divorce and separation. It's a topic that is impacting so many people today, and we want to be on the cutting edge. We want to be a ministry that helps to answer your questions and guide you. And so we brought, I think, some of the best people that we could bring within the Orthodox world to talk about this topic. You know, for many of you, you know that the reality is that every 13 seconds there is a divorce that takes place in our country. We know that there are many couples that are just many marriages that are even struggling. They may be staying together, and living in the same house, but living very, very far apart. And tonight we want to dedicate a specific area of divorce, and that is on what the United States Surgeon General calls the greatest epidemic facing our society today, and that is loneliness. You know, loneliness not only impacts us physiologically and relationally. It impacts us in the way in which we are the experience of sadness when we don't have that person around us, that when we're used to have friends that we used to hang around with that no longer want to hang around with us, or maybe they feel having to choose between the different sides in a divorcee in a relationship that's been separated. We also see about how the loneliness that's created in just being at events and maybe at times feeling as what some people may call the third wheel. Just not feeling like you're part of anything. We want to dedicate a show to that. Not only does it impact us, though, relationally, as I mentioned, it also impacts us physiologically. Do you know that most early onset of death, one of the big leading triggers that we're seeing with that is that of loneliness? There's 29% increased of risk of heart disease, a 32% increased risk of a stroke, and 50% increased risk of developing dementia as older adults. So how does loneliness impact those who are separated and divorced? How does it impact you who may be suffering from a separation or divorce right now? It's impacting so many people, not having anyone to talk to. Well, tonight we brought our friends, and we want to tell you a little bit about them before we answer some of the many questions that we've received already. First, I want to reintroduce you to Maria Boyle. Maria Boyle is the ministry leader of Saints Peter and Paul Divorce Rebuilders in Glenview, Illinois, that offers support and guidance to those who are separated in divorce. She does amazing, amazing work. And for over a decade, Divorce Rebuilders has addressed the contemporary needs of Orthodox Christians by offering them a place to process the many aspects of the divorce experience through instruction, guidance, and support. She has over 30 years of counseling experience. And so she's just an amazing person to have on. And also Hope Evans. Hope received her Bachelor's of Science in Nursing from Montana State University in 2011. She has worked at 3 different hospitals across Montana throughout her career. She is someone that currently works as a critical care nurse in the Adult Intensive Care unit at Community Medical Center in Missoula. And so we're so happy to have Hope as well. And Christina, who's currently employed as a nursing assistant at Providence St. Patrick's Hospital in Missoula, and the 3 of them have just spent a tremendous amount of time, you should know this, preparing for this show, because they just feel like we need to provide a platform to help address these issues that so many people are impacting. So to you, Maria, to Christina, and to Hope, welcome to Live with the Louhs.
Thank you, Father Nick.
So Maria, right before the show started, we had an emailer send us this comment. The emailer says, I am divorced for 9 years, she says. I've been divorced for 9 years after 31 years of marriage. The most difficult challenge is living alone. I find myself choosing going places alone because friends or family need weeks in advance notice to commit to a shared activity. Often they are not even interested, or your schedules or our schedules are different. It's a very sad situation for me. Married and partnered couples don't understand what it's like eating dinner alone night after night. Maria, why is this epidemic so dangerous for us?
It's so saddening that 50% of our population, United States, divorced, single, married, have stated measurable feelings of loneliness. I mean, when I saw that statistic from the United States Surgeon General, I was in shock. I said, have we become a lonely nation? And then there are numbers from Australia and Uganda that show only 10% of that population shows any feelings of loneliness. So I'm saying, here we are priding ourselves, the United States of America, land of the free, and yet we can't keep engaged. In fact, the Dr. Murthy, the Surgeon General, calls it a result of social disconnection. So I think the baseline is first to understand that we come from a deficiency already, right? As a country, that we need to start looking at, acknowledge it, like they say, label it, know what it is. In fact, it is more dangerous than obesity and drugs, which were like major health concerns for years and years now. And this is pre-COVID. This was pre-COVID, and now it's come to the awareness that this is continuing on. And so it's a saddening fact, but if we understand that we are already in a deficiency, what do you do if you're deficiency of potassium or calcium, whatever? You take a vitamin pill, you change your lifestyle, you do something differently. And I think that instead of sitting and brooding about it, we need to take some action, right? However, I think we have to understand the baseline so we're not all so critical of ourselves. If we're already deficient as a nation, if we already have social disconnection, this is far more than just being divorced or separated or a widow, okay? It's a systemic thing. And so now, when you're divorced or widowed or single, as this woman says, everything else gets exacerbated. And you think it's only you. And so I think this is a bigger issue. Obviously, we're going to talk about some solutions, but I think that I would say to this woman, it's very natural and normal for her to feel the effects of being married for 31 years and all of a sudden, that's come apart. And also, it's difficult to set up new associations as a newly single person. away from the coupled person, it's a different dynamic. So I can understand how there needs to be new, unusual ways to combat this. And I mean combat this.
There's so many people what I hope that this show will provide will just be a window into what people experience, because I think that's really what our show, what we aim to do is, and on so many different levels, is just try to put someone else in someone else's shoes. And I'll never forget when my mom, in some ways, divorce is a death. We talk about this, but I remember when my father had passed away, I remember my mom saying, Nick, I feel like I'm an orphan. I feel like I just don't have anywhere, to go, because so much of our connections and our relationships were that of being together. And I'm sure it's the same way in a marriage. So, I definitely, I'm looking forward to us having this conversation. And again, I want to invite our listeners, if you'd like to talk to our astounding team that we have here tonight, call us at 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855-237-2346, or email us, as this other emailer did. Email us a question or a comment. We'll definitely get to it during the live broadcast of our show. Email us at ask@ancientfaith.com.
Yeah, I think that this is something worth talking about. I mean, something that you're discussing really that is in the culture and privy today. I think certainly post-divorce, this is exacerbated. Post-loss of a loved one, this is exacerbated. But it sounds like there's a level of loneliness that actually exists in our population as a whole already. That I think many of us are, not acknowledging that there is this greater struggle, across our culture. I mean, interestingly, I was watching the Blue Zone documentary the other night, and, they really talked about these people who are living long, and they exist in community, whether they've been married or not married, whether they've lost someone or not, whether they're living in old age. There is a level of community with which they have found a way to stay connected. And I don't always know that our country does a good job of, putting us into community regularly. And so what I hear you saying, Maria, is that this is just exacerbated for people who are divorced or who are widowed, but it is something that across our culture we are struggling with as a whole.
Exactly. And, if there's some factors here, I can go over them very quickly, Father Nick and Dr. Roxanne.
Sure.
And I was doing some research, and what is it about our culture, our traditions, the way we live our life that's come to this point in which a lot of all countries are looking up to us, and then we're looking inside of us and we're devoid, And number one is that our priority on creating wealth and materialistic things at the expense of personal relationships, okay? We think that's going to make us happy. And the other thing is high value placed on independence, not needing others, versus interdependence. Dr. Roxanne, like you said, in Ikari and in another place in Japan, in which health, yes, is important. A Mediterranean diet is important. But the leading factor that's making centurions out of these people is their deep dependence, interdependence on each other. I've got your back. You've got my back. I need a knife. I need some oil. I need some help here in the garden. Will you come and help me? They know there are people for them. We here are saying if we make enough money, when we can have our own services, we don't have to bother our neighbor, and we can be islands on our own. Back to the time the pioneers went in America, got tracts of land, built their own log cabin, got a mail order bride, brought her in, had their own children, and had a rifle to make sure that nobody came, they could defend themselves. I mean, we prided on this, and yet to the point is, to what point do we take it when our natural urge that God made us to relate to one another, to need one another. In fact, Christ himself had disciples with him. He had, as I say, parea, friendships with them at all time. In fact, he was upset when he had to go pray to the Lord, to his God before his suffering, and his disciples were not attentive to him. And he took it personally. Like, can't you stay up for a while? So it's a natural DNA for us. So yes, it's nice to be independent, but to what point? Do we say, okay, I have a $300,000 house in Chicago that's 1,600 square feet, but I can go, an hour away and get a 2,200 square foot house for maybe $60,000 more. Yeah, you can. Yeah, it's wonderful. Yeah, it's brand new. But what are you leaving behind? Your grandparents, your cousins, your friends.
Right.
And what is the price? We're seeing the price. Yes, we have that ability, and we should be independent. But the interdependence and people around you, where is the value of that? Have we forgotten?
I think that too, and also too, Maria. This leads us to our another email question and comment. But I think too, when we're just seeing really the breakdown of what the family, what individuality is, what family should look like. We're seeing that almost at every single level of sociology, we're seeing this breakdown of what was called the nuclear family, and obviously that's permeating within the family. So not only do you have a family that would look on the outside like a normal family, but this new agenda that we see kind of I would say, influencing the family unit is causing that, even that level of independence within that, I want to explore, I want to experience, I want to, if I feel it, I want to do it, kind of a deal. And it's just kind of, in many ways, kind of the guardrails are kind of off on that. But I want to get to this, Hope. This was an email comment and question that came in. And it says, the emailer says this: loneliness is a huge issue for me. Some people may deal with this by getting into a new relationship right away. Can you talk about the pitfalls of doing this and any advice that you can give regarding that?
Yeah, that temptation is very strong, and I want to acknowledge that desire isn't necessarily coming from a bad place. We desire to be connected with another human, and when we've lost that connection, it is really an injury to our soul and our being. And I think that the important thing for me, just to be vulnerable with where I was at, is I didn't want to numb myself. And I think that's the important thing, is that we can numb ourselves with a variety of different experiences, alcohol, food, new relationship, anything. I think it's important to ask yourself, am I just trying to replace what I lost? Or is this really a person that I see myself spending my life with moving forward? And that's not always obvious right away.
Right.
Yeah.
She continues on, this emailer. She says that in the same vein, everyone thinks that married people are happier. But this is obviously her opinion, but my understanding is that this is only an average, and in fact, some couples are really happy and some are absolutely unhappy compared to single people. When I think about it, some of the happiest times in my life were when I was single. Can you also talk about that? So, hope maybe just address a little bit of that. I think that it's that old adage of the illusion that the grass is always greener on the other side, and that if you just that. Or when we look at people's social media profiles and, they're in a relationship and how that makes other people feel. But I think you were mentioning that earlier about how, the desire to want to be with someone and be in a relationship, because there's this sometimes a perception that if I'm just with someone that they will complete me, as that Jerry Maguire said, that, you complete me, kind of a comment. But maybe just speak a little bit more about that if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Your lovely assistant told me to turn up my volume, and I don't know how to do that, so I'm just going to try to talk louder. So I think that how do we do that? I think that there's other ways that we can be very filled through relationship and connection. I know that post-divorce, I have a depth of friendship with friends, that either new friends or old friends that I had that I chose to be vulnerable with, that I didn't have before. And really those relationships I go back to, and that helps me to fill that void. Because right now, I don't think that I'm in a place to be in a relationship, that I have more healing to do, and we all have healing, but that's where I'm at right now. And how do I continue to get those needs met? Because they're real human needs. And exactly. I think pressing into those other relationships and being vulnerable and being willing to share where you're at, we're really missing that person that we were vulnerable with, right? Like we're missing that person that every day we were able to tell them what was really going on.
Right.
And I think in our society, it's acceptable to be vulnerable within your own household, but then when you're vulnerable outside of that, it's weakness. And we kind of see that in our social media platforms as well. We're just trying to constantly project a good life, a happy life, whatever that means, instead of being real with our struggles and where we're at.
Mm-hmm.
And Christina, maybe you could help weigh in on this as well in terms of what Hope, I hear you sharing, that there is such an importance of being able to feel and not numb and not sort of chase the sort of next chapter, that it's, we want to sit in that space. And what I hear you saying is connection is actually vitally important in helping us carry that emotion, right? That if we don't have somebody that we're able to be vulnerable with in those difficult emotions, how do we not look for the next chapter to just get away from those difficult emotions? Because I think that's what I hear most often from people who are sitting in my office, is that the hardest thing about being alone is feeling everything. There is not a distraction. And so how do I sit with that when those emotions can feel overwhelming and uncomfortable, and we can't always control where we go with that? And so, I'd love to hear you both sort of weigh in on how do we hold that level of emotion and that part of the experience so we're not fast forwarding through it into a chapter that we may not be ready for.
Yeah, I think Blaise Pascal says that all of man's troubles come from not being able to sit alone in a room with our own quiet, with our own thoughts, and with our own souls. I think it's an interesting sort of comparative loneliness, right? Like being lonely, as this caller in was stating, lonely within relationship, not being seen, not being understood, maybe needs aren't being met. That's a different kind of loneliness than being single in the world, where an external pressure of the fairy tale, happy, riding off into the sunset. So suddenly this loneliness sounds different. Maybe it's like I'm never going to find my person. I'm never going to find that miracle of love and happiness. And again, whatever that means, because it can be a really personally defined thing. I think for me personally, my goal isn't happiness. It is a peace of mind. It's a peace of heart. And being able to sit in that discomfort, even being a witness to that discomfort. If you've ever, sat with someone who's just really in the dark place, in the hole, in the desert of that loneliness, it can be very, very uncomfortable. We want to offer solutions, and sometimes our words fall short. They don't meet the full depth of that feeling.
I totally, I love that we're having this conversation, and I love the fact that we started this new with Ancient Faith, having us be able to see the people that we're speaking with and the guests that we're on, and having to be able to see you all. They talk about 90% of communication is nonverbal, and just being able to kind of walk with all of you and to see what, just kind of see and empathize with what you are experiencing. But I love, if you're joining us this evening, you couldn't have picked a better night to join us on Live with the Louhs. We're speaking with three extraordinary women. We're speaking with Maria Boyle, Hope Evans, and Christina Elderkin. These are three women who are using the difficulty, one may even talk about this, a tragedy or a struggle in their life, to bring some peace and hope, not only in their lives, but more importantly for all of our lives, especially people that are gone through a divorce or separation. They're here talking to us about a topic within divorce, about loneliness, and how so many people experience loneliness as even with in a family where everyone is there, but also loneliness that we can experience in hearing about it through the eyes of those who are divorcees. And so thanks so much for being with us. And we encourage you, as we do all throughout our shows, is to call in or to email us a question. That number is 1-855-237-2346. Or email us a question. We are getting flooded, by the way, with emails, which is great. Email us a question at ask@ancientfaith.com. That's ask@ancientfaith.com. Christina, this was an email that just came in, and this is what it states. It says, I was recently divorced. My ex-husband wanted the divorce and was not willing to go to counseling or to do anything to save our marriage. A couple of weeks ago, he wanted to celebrate our anniversary together, and he often asked me to go out to dinner with him when he takes our son out. I have declined and find these are mixed messages that we're setting. I would appreciate any advice that you may have. And so maybe, Christina, you can start us out, and I'd love to hear from also Maria and Hope on this topic.
Yeah, she's declined. I think the intention may be really positive, unless you sat down. A book that really helped me through this process of divorce and even healing afterwards was conscious uncoupling, and making the unconscious conscious, right?
Sure.
And part of that, what I hear from this is also maybe there's implied boundaries, and maybe just making those explicit and stating, it makes me uncomfortable. This is maybe a mixed message. I think that consciousness and that awareness brings a really healthy degree of conversation into the dynamic, and whether or not that conversation it stops there or goes further it still is important to set a boundary. And so I think what that means, it doesn't have to be like cruel or mean to say, it just doesn't sit right with me. Maybe in the future we can revisit this, but I right now, this is where I'm at.
Maria?
Good boundaries are always clear and kind.
Mm-hmm. Hope, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I was just going to say, good boundaries are always clear and kind, and I think that, especially to protect, for the sender of that email, to protect herself and her own healing journey moving forward, setting that boundary now is going to be really helpful.
Maria, would you like to weigh in a little bit on this?
I'd agree. I think boundaries are important. Protecting your heart is important. Probing, and saying, why is it important to you that I'm with you, with my son? This is a visitation. Can you explain to me more about why that's important to you? And and then let it go again. That would help me understand. Yes, protecting yourself. And if you don't feel comfortable with it, you don't want just to go in because someone suggested it. You want to sit and wait, and perhaps even ask, someone for advice before you proceed. Yeah.
I mean, that's
and also, I just want to say,
go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to say boundaries can be adjusted later. So I think early on in the process, you really need some higher walls for safety, and that doesn't mean that has to be that way forever.
I think that's such wise advice, Hope. I think that's great, because I think sometimes we deal with things especially when we ask questions like this, is they're coming from a place of worry or fear, and so we tend to want to make sure that we kind of make decisions that are going to be totally for absolute. And I just would say that we can. There's nothing wrong with saying let's revisit this in 2 or 3 months. Let's see where we're at in 2 or 3 months, and giving that opportunity for that the healing to take place.
Yeah. I do think that I do see quite a few people sort of struggle in this phase, and I'd love to sort of ask you guys about this. And I do feel like the motivation is to avoid the loneliness or the reality of the next chapter. And therefore people sort of stay in this space of, well, let's still see each other, but there's not really a productive component of it, because we're not looking to save the marriage. We're not doing the work to save the marriage, or at least one party is not interested in saving the marriage, but there's still a desire to sort of stay in the realm of one another. And I guess that is a question I have for both of you. You know, in people doing that to avoid loneliness, what are your thoughts? And hope maybe you could sort of start us off on that.
Yeah, I think doing that is going to prolong the period of grieving and can create more confusion. There's a lot of confusion when you're going through a divorce, whether it was something, you know, no matter who filed, no matter the situation that led to it, there is a lot of confusion and pain and questioning, who am I now? And was my reality ever true? I was listening to a podcast the other day and it said, it's not that your house was taken away or collapsed. It was that the foundation under your house collapsed.
Wow.
And it's a really, really deep wound. And I think in our society, we're so intolerant of sitting in grief, sitting in loneliness, sitting with these uncomfortable emotions and these uncomfortable parts that come up for us, that we want to do anything we can to skip past that. And people around us want us to be better as well, right? Like, it's hard for them to sit in the uncomfortable place with us. So they oftentimes, not intentionally, but want to help us skip ahead too. And you just can't skip over that. And when you're putting yourself back into that place where you're constantly seeing that person again, over and above what you have to for just life and shared children and all of that, that can just prolong that process.
Just because we're getting so many callers and emailers, I want to just keep the conversation going. Again, we invite you to call in today on our show. It's at 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855-237-2346. I want to welcome Georgia. Georgia, welcome to Live with the Louhs.
Well, thank you, Father Nick. It's nice to be on, and thank you all for putting on such a wonderful presentation that I know is going to help everyone feeling loneliness through divorce. Unfortunately, yes, we are in this station in our lives that most of us, or if not all of us, did not see it coming, did not know that we were going to end up in divorce. It's very unfortunate. There are a lot of emotions that we all go through, and there are many stations in life. My question to you is, how can we break free from the disappointment that divorce leads us into feeling loneliness? I don't want, and I see many women and men, they're waiting for that special someone, and there's disappointment after disappointment. Why do we need to wait for that special someone? What can we do? What can we seek in order for us to feel whole again, in order for us to give maybe back to the community, maybe lend a helping hand to someone, carry someone else's cross? What can we do in order to strengthen ourselves first?
Maria, why don't you start that out? I think that I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Thank you, Georgia, for your call.
What a great question.
I missed her last sentence. Somehow it got blurred. What was her last? Could you repeat that again, Georgia? Your last sentence. What was the last question?
What can we do in order to strengthen ourselves first?
To strengthen ourselves?
Yeah, to strengthen ourselves first rather than jumping into that, having to find that next right person.
I got that. Well, I think that to wait around to fill that void with another person, I mean, it's just very natural when you've lost someone you cared, or a spouse, that you want to fill that void to feel whole again, right? There's a hole there you want to feel. And the natural thing is, let me find somebody else to take the place to fill that void. And you might not be ready for that. In other words, there are things that maybe you want to reflect back. You want to recreate yourself, have a new identity. You're not longer married right now. Now you're yourself. Who are you? Are you a mirror image of that other person who's gone? And is that what your description is of yourself? Go back to where you were younger. What were your hopes and dreams? What did you want to do that you put it on the side? What are friends that you haven't connected to and deepened the relationships, whether they're married or single? It could be people back, that you haven't seen for years. So I think it's important to say, what am I going to do to renew, create myself, re-identify myself? Because now I have an opportunity. And where do I get opportunities to find out, what are my gifts? What are my strengths? What is my purpose? And that means yes, we want to meet people. Yes, if you want to be meeting people of the opposite sex, that's fine. But that shouldn't be your pivotal most important drive. Usually it is, because it's a quick fix. Let me get somebody to fill that void, to put that nail in, and continue on. However, since it's a 75% chance you'll be divorced again if you've been married a second time, so the statistic for divorce is good for a second marriages. The point is that to reflect on yourself. So I would say take action. Get yourself in meeting new friends. Get involved in service projects. Volunteer. Not all at one time. I'm a big proponent of exercise. I know 5 times a week, go and exercise. Go to a health club. Go to your YMCA, and not do it by yourself. Do it with other people. A group of people doing aerobics. A group of people doing swimming. A group of people doing strength classes. So there's other people you can meet and talk and begin getting friendships. Bible study groups, reading inspirational messages like the Louhs have every morning to sort of garner a perspective and continue on. It's very important then and a little bit every day to find out, and all of a sudden you'll find new interests, you'll find new people to share, and also feel like, oh, this is an adventure. I haven't had a chance to do this before, and go on step by step that way.
That's excellent. Thank you.
Beautiful answer, Maria.
Thank you, Georgia, for calling us in. And I want to segue. We have a audio question that someone had sent earlier today. So I'll have our producer play that audio question from Hannah, and then we'll ask Hope to respond.
Hannah. I am from the Billings, Montana area, and I've been friends with Hope for a little while now. We recently connected as I've recently left my own marriage. On the topic of loneliness and experiences after divorce, I haven't necessarily hit that phase yet. I'm only a couple months out, but I've already been feeling quite a few things. And with loneliness, I feel a comparison between before and after. And before in my marriage, I felt very, very lonely, very isolated for a long time. And the only thing that gave me refuge was prayer. And afterwards, I have not felt lonely as many people have stepped up in my life, but I sense that I will hit a different type of loneliness further down the road. And of course, I'm, full of fear about that, especially when I stop living with my family and I put my life back together and I move back to a place on my own. So I'm curious about that different type of loneliness that I may encounter, and how much deeper that may be and how much more painful it may be, and the fear around it, and really how to handle that. Thank you guys so much.
Hope, that, Hannah's comments are so obviously very vulnerable, but just really share so many different emotions as I'm hearing it. What guidance would you say? Do we find different stages of loneliness throughout especially in this season of divorce and separation? I mean, does it get worse? How does it get worse? Walk us through that.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I want to just applaud Hannah. I think you're very wise for understanding that right now you're still in it. You're still in the fight, flight, freeze moment. And I didn't understand that when I was in that. And it's only looking back that I am able to grasp Oh, wow. Yeah. When I felt like I could just move mountains in the beginning, it's because I, my body was in flight mode. And it does hit you later. And the loneliness does change, when just like a death, when you have that immediate response of everyone's coming for the funeral, everyone's gathering together, reminiscing. There's this outpouring, or for some, and I was blessed to have the outpouring of love from my family and support. And then you get back to real life. And I remember reading a passage that said, now that I have gone through this suffering, I don't know how to live. And I wrote that in my journal because I related to that so much. And I think, yes, you're going to hit different stages of loneliness. And the most important thing you can do is to continue to reach out and to share with someone else what that stage feels like. And my therapist tells me all the time to trust the process. And most of the time I want to smack her when she says that. But it's very true, because this is a process and it's a journey. And only now that I'm able to start to come above the clouds do I realize how much truth there is in that. That you just keep going, and you pray, you read an akathist, you reach out to someone else, you go outside, you're vulnerable, and then you just wake up the next day and do it again.
How pivotal would you say is your connection to Christ and the church? Hope, really for all three of you, but I mean, just Hope, while you're talking, I mean, how have you found your relationship with Christ guiding you through that? Because I loved how she said that earlier, that prayer, that she didn't feel alone when she was praying, and how important that is just to connect to Christ.
Yes. I recently went back to reading an akathist that I have here in front of me, and it's the akathist to Jesus, Light to Those in Darkness. And it has been something that I continue to go back to. And this one ethos just really speaks to me, and it says, "O Lord, I am separated from the one who once loved me, and sorrow has estranged me from my friends. I am weary with crying, and my eyes fail while I wait for my God. Emptiness and loneliness crush me every night, and meaningless haunts me by day." And this passage, especially for me, going back and reading it on those especially lonely days, it gives me words when I don't have words to describe how I feel. Yeah. And so the beauty of our Orthodox faith, giving us these prayers, these akathis, that we can pray when we don't even know what to say. I don't know how to express the deep pain of my heart. And I'm just thankful for the church for providing these resources. They have been very sustaining for me.
Christina, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I alone, that loneliness also led me to prayer, being in solitude, seeking out that solitude, but also the very real comfort for me came from also reading The Way of the Spirit. And in that, there's comfort in that God knows every fiber of my being. God knows the depths of my pain. And suddenly I'm comforted by that. I can feel the sunlight on my face. I'm encouraged by those around me. And I remember especially just grasping at every small thing to be grateful for, and offering that gratitude as part of that prayer whenever I was really struggling. And yeah, I was surprised over and over again by that comfort and that grace. And it would be in words with friends, like a conversation, or something that I really needed to hear. And also just embracing the suffering that I was given as something that I didn't quite understand, but that was for my spiritual growth, and that was really an important and a great comfort to me.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that, the caller spoke about the difference between lonely in a marriage versus lonely post-marriage. Yeah. And I don't know that we always really think about that many people in marriages that are not working are very, very, very lonely even before they reach the stage of truly walking away, and that experience in and of itself can be a difficult stage because nobody even recognizes it or sees it, because there's nothing wrong. You're fine. You're at events with your spouse, and everything should be fine. But we all know that there's tremendous pain in that stage of loneliness as well. But I'd love to hear from each of you about how you're really addressing loneliness in your own life, and really your nugget of wisdom or advice for everyone listening who has entered that stage or is fearful about entering that stage, that very real chapter.
Maria, why don't you start us out?
Okay, how do we deal with loneliness? For myself is that I think that I'm mostly outgoing, but I'm not outgoing to the point that unless you approach me, I'm going to approach. Once I'm approached, I can be talking a mile a minute, as you probably have experienced in these podcasts. But anyhow, and so I took some notes, and I'm trying to think to myself some strategies to be able to impart to others. And be the friend you wish you had. So be caring, be loving, be compassionate. And I try to use words of blessings to people. May Lord help you. Yeah, you will strengthen you. Go forward. I believe in you. What would I need as sustenance? Because I have felt down so many times, and I have felt lonely so many times. What has pulled me up? By hearing and give it to others and seeing other people respond to it positively, it makes me feel good. And what is servicing? When we do service to people, when we help other people, we think we're helping them, but really we're helping ourselves because we feel good that we made a difference. We want to feel like we belong. We want to feel seen. We don't want to feel invisible, and we want to do the purpose that God put us on this world to do. So it's sort of little things like that is helpful. I remember 10 years ago, I was swimming at the YMCA the day after New Year's. And there was the lane. I usually like to have my own lane. And sometimes if you have to share. But there happened to be one lane empty, and I was not in that lane. And so a person came in and could have had the empty lane, jumped in my lane to swim laps. And I was annoyed. Why are you in my lap? There's a free lap. And he happened to be a male, which annoyed me even more. And so, because I felt uncomfortable. And so, all right, so there's a free lane. You chose my lane. So I kept swimming. I did my 30 minutes, and I came out, and I was going to turn around, and he was going to enter in. And I just picked on my head with my goggles and said, "Hi, how are you? You can share my lane." And just said nothing and left. So I got out of the pool, and then he approached me. I said, okay, he's going to hit on me or something. I felt really uncomfortable and started talking to me. And he says to me, he goes, "I want to thank you for acknowledging me. I had the worst New Year's Day ever. And just you saying hi made all the difference. I came here just to be with others." I'll always remember how a smile, how a gentle touch, how a caring thought, how a blessing, a well-wish can make a difference. How I'm tired of going down hallways of people, especially when I worked. And they were lovely people. And people said, "How are you? Good morning." And then their eyes skirted away, right? Because they didn't really want to know how you are, because they didn't really want to involve themselves in a conversation. And how that I remember when I said good morning, I made sure my eyes met their eyes, lingered for a while, so they knew that I cared about how they are. And if they wanted to entertain a conversation, it didn't have to be now this minute because we were busy people, but maybe we can do it later. So that little things like this can be aware of social disconnection is the virus of this country. Can we be more present and more mindful to connect with people? So that's one thing that I thought. Be the friend you wish you had. It says it takes 90 hours to establish a friend and 200 hours to really be best friends. So it's an investment. You want a friend? It's an investment of time. It's not a text message. It's not social media. It's not like, how are you? It's investing face-to-face time with people, okay? Develop the skill of reflection and listening, right, Dr. Roxanne? How important is that? Listening. I mean, I know you can talk an hour about it. You can teach the skills about that. People feel heard. People feel important. That's how you make those friends to continue on. And, of course, be tender and kind. The other thing is take action at risks. Dr. Roxanne, in our last podcast, we were talking about don't wait to feel better to get better, right? And so I also talked about just a few minutes ago about exercising, seeing your priest, being engaged in Bible studies, et cetera, and getting out there. Yes, it's uncomfortable, but you have to get out of your comfort zone, out of that lonely box, and engage, social engagement, because we need to do that. And it's a habit, it's a muscle. And the last thing that is important to me is that it's difficult for me to pray, because when I pray, my mind goes off and I get, like thoughts that I can't be in a quieted place unless I'm really, really purposely putting myself in a situation. So what I do when I come across like your inspirational messages or other messages or quotes of the Bible, I put them on Post-its. I put them all over the house, in the mirror, in the bathroom, on my refrigerator. So wherever I'm feeling like, I'm by myself tonight, it's 9 o'clock, when I can read those inspirational messages that I came across, and that sort of inspires me. And that helps me to sit and pray, because I have to have a restless mind. And also, lately I have asked someone to pray for me. And sometimes sometimes I tell people, can I pray with you when they're on the phone? Let's pray. Let's go to this Bible passage. Let's pray together. Let's read together. Let's say the Paterimon or the Lord's Prayer together, and ask for help. You've got to help wherever you can. Your priest, your friends that and be vulnerable. Like Hope said, it's important to be vulnerable and open. And obviously, if it's not received, you don't have to continue, but you have to take some personal risks to engage and make friends.
I just wanted to, that's just such sound advice. And I love,
people took notes.
I was going to say, well, thankfully this is all recorded, and you can listen to all of these podcasts that we have on our website. They're all archived there. So just go to thelouhs.com and they're all there. But I love what you were sharing, Maria. I think it's so powerful and such so applicable. But turning on the other side, Hope, I'd love to ask you, and Christina as well, okay, for those of us who are seeing people, how do we become a support team to those who are experiencing loneliness? What would you be, maybe Hope, start this out. What are some practical things that we can do to really help people that are experiencing loneliness? I'll give you an example. At our church, we started a new ministry that's for those who are experiencing divorce or separation. And I will tell you that I cannot tell you how often it breaks my heart to hear the people that were speaking at this meeting and the one that we had previously, talking about how much they feel alone, even at church, where everyone is at coffee hour, they're hanging out with their friends, their family, and how often they don't get invited to certain things because they're not, people are uncomfortable or worried about how they may be in that environment. It's a couple's night out, and you don't want to be a third wheel. I mean, what are some ways that we can really help and empower us to kind of help and to be on the lookout, like the other women were sharing with you, Maria, to see the people that are just wanting to be seen and to help, fill that loneliness gap?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think when you were saying about the experiences of these individuals in your group and feeling lonely at church, I related to that so much. And I think what helped was when people would walk up and acknowledge me. And I think when you're initially divorced or separated and you're trying to go back to church and you're trying to engage in that environment that you've engaged with your spouse, it is so painful, and just being there is so difficult. And I commend anyone who's doing it, because literally the act of showing up is so hard. And so for people who are there, if you know someone's suffering, go engage with them. Just engage with them. Be a listening ear. I just had someone this week ask me 3 times, but how are you really doing? And finally, on the 3rd time, I felt like I could tell him. And I thanked him at the end of the conversation. Thanks for asking me 3 different times. Because by the 3rd time, I realized that you really wanted to know.
Wow.
Wow, isn't that so?
Even the way we ask the "How are you" matters.
Yeah.
Persistence matters, and how are you really, or today? I mean, I actually say to listen rather than, as Maria said, moving on, because we ask that in passing all the time. Oh, how are you doing?
Yes.
Right, but not in a way that invites the answer. And Christina, your thoughts?
I would just even. You don't have to say, I heard about your divorce. You could say, hey, I know you might be going through a hard time right now. And that's just it's not just, it is how we ask that matters. It's permission for the other person to show up as imperfect and hurting and in pain. And we don't like showing our pain. I think just generally, that's unsafe. That's unacceptable to show just how much I'm hurting right now, right? And so when you ask with genuine concern and care, I think in non-judgment, we talked about that in the past. It's an invitation to say, show up as your authentic self in this moment. That doesn't mean I'm asking you to relive the horror or the sadness or the sorrow, but I'm with you. I'm right next to you. I'm here. You're not alone.
I think it's so important for all of us as we're listening to the 3 of you speak, and I just again appreciate your vulnerability and your desire to make a difference in the lives of people. And I as you all know, we here on the show, I mean, Roxanne and I are just so wanting this show to be a platform for topics like this, for people to be able to feel comfortable and to be able to land at a safe place and to have these kind of honest and open conversations. I just couldn't help, and I really would encourage our listeners. It's so easy in our life to kind of, like at a death, like at a funeral, that we do great sprints, as we talk about a lot, but not good marathons. We're there and we're like, oh, I'm so sorry to hear about this, and sorry about the loss that you're experiencing. But we then tend to forget. It's like out of sight, out of mind. And I think it's so important, and I loved how all 3 of you were mentioning this, is that genuine desire to get beyond the surface level conversations, which we do. It's like, I think sometimes I could ask, how are you doing? How are you doing? And everybody says the same thing, doing great, doing great, doing great. It's like such a almost a robotic response that we have. But the ability to say, how are you doing really? And genuinely care about what that response is. I think it's great advice for in general, not just in this particular topic, but being able to really delve into people and to know that that if you are going through a divorce, or if you're going or are considering it, or if you're going through difficulties, reach out to your priest, reach out to people. All of these 3 amazing women are all friends. They lean on each other, and they are utilizing the tag teaming of their efforts to make a difference. But be around people that feed you, spiritually, emotionally, in ways that, and encouraging you to be the best person that you can be. Roxanne, I know that we've just got a few more moments. I'd love to kind of get your thoughts before we have to close out the show, and just just some final comments.
We will have you guys sort of, I know it's hard to sum up in a couple minutes, but would love to hear just your final nuggets of wisdom in a couple minutes each, or maybe a minute each.
Yes. Maria, why don't you start us out with that?
Well, I'll just review the things, the to-do things. Is number one is to learn to build relationships, learn new skills. We can always learn new skills to build relationships, so that you can meet those people, Dr. Nick, as you said, people that are positives, who are spiritual and engage and take those risks. Take action, get involved in life, try new adventures. They might not all work out, a little bit at a time. I had some time ago, I had an email, and then I pursued a phone call with a young lady who had been divorced, and for 3 years would go home and just stay in her house, work, and then stay in her house from 6 o'clock till she fell asleep, stayed in her room rather, in her bedroom. And she was like despondent and despair. And this was after our first podcast we did. And I got her on the phone because when she said despair, I was worried. And I told her to get out, to do some exercise 5 times a week, to join a Bible study group, to go running again, and to connect with some old friends. And later on, she told me she did that. And she also started gardening, which she had forgotten to do, and was going to also do some patio work in her backyard. But she had completely transformed just by getting out of her shell, getting out of this routine, take some risks, engaging outside. So take actions. Don't wait to feel better to get better, and then build your spiritual muscle, whatever that may mean. You don't know what it means. Talk to your priest. He'll have 100 different ideas how you can engage in that. Read the inspirational messages that the Louhs send every day. Read the sermons that you have. I'm thinking, Dr. Roxanne and Father Nick, you have created a community right here of caring, of compassion, and that all of us are profiting from this. And we're all vulnerable because you're allowing us to be vulnerable and accepting. And I hope that the listeners understand what a precious gift this is, to have this platform that you have, not only in this topic, all these topics. And I really invite this open, genuine conversation. I hope what we've said have elicited feelings from other people that, hey, we're all the same, we're made the same, we go through experiences. And also my last words of advice is, I try to target not on the how, but the who. Yeah, we talk about how to make friends, but the who. Who am I? What is my identity? I'm the daughter of God. I'm the daughter of God. So it's nice to do all these things and see friends or whatever, but the bottom line is, what is my identity? Divorced, widowed, single, married. I'm the daughter or the son of God.
That is absolutely beautiful. And I think Hope and Christina will have to save your nuggets for, we'll post them if you can send them to us, because we didn't really, I mean, we could have you guys on. I mean, I know you feel the same way, Nick, I would love 2 hours. With you guys.
I think what we're going to decide to do, because I agree with you, Roxanne.
I have so much more I want to say and ask.
I think that for sure, what we're going to do is allow this show, Live with the Louhs in general, to be a platform for the three of you to come and at different times throughout the year, and I hope that we could do another show in the next 4 to 6 weeks, to be quite honest with you, maybe as we're approaching the holidays, especially where these can be very difficult times, to have a special show dedicated to the holidays, and just helping people to navigate through that. And I hope that all three of you will join us for that show, and we'll talk offline about when to schedule that. But I definitely want to encourage you to see your schedules and to see if you're available to be there. But thank you to you, Maria, to Hope, to Christina. I'm looking at all you through the little boxes that I have on my screen. But just want to thank you all so much. I know Roxanne and I are so grateful for your friendship.
Thank you.
Just tremendous.
And definitely look forward to having you on again. And I want to thank Matushka Trudy, as always, for producing tonight's show. She does such an amazing job in doing so. And friends, as we're sharing this with you, please know that if you are going through a difficult time, do not travel alone. Reach out to people, connect with people that you can even connect to us. I mean, you can email us a question, go through our website, but definitely connect with a spiritual leader, your parish priest. I just don't want you to travel any more in that loneliness, and allow people to kind of journey with you and to guide you through that. And with that, my friends, God bless you and stay strong in your faith. And we look forward to having you again for a brand new show next Tuesday. God bless you all.
The book Renewing You, a priest, a psychologist, and a plan, which can be purchased at store.ancientfaith.com. Their daily inspirational messages can be found at thelouhs.com/subscribe. Be sure also to search for The Louhs on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Live with the Louhs is a listener-supported presentation of Ancient Faith Radio.